Welcome ladies and gentlemen back to another video. Today we are reacting to the Primarch's Rogal Dorn lore, the Praetorian of Terra, and obviously Primarch of the Imperial Fists. Now, I think it's high time I done a video on Rogal Dorn, considering we're quite a ways into the TTS series and he's a pretty big character in there. And well, I know nothing about him except for the fact that he likes to make bad jokes, I guess, or be very literal. That's what I'm trying to say. He's very literal, you know. He takes everything as it comes to, you know. Someone likened him to Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy, which I can agree with. Well, yeah, we actually get to find out what he was actually like. Obviously, not too much is known of what his outcome was. I think they found his hand, I believe, on a ship, but they don't know if he's dead, where he is, what happened. So yeah, Rogal Dorn. I think he also built the Imperial Palace, right? I think that's what it was. But yeah, I'm interested to see what his real story is, man. So, without further ado, we're going to get into this. Now, if you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Also, you can join our Discord, where all kinds of Warhammer fun goes on. And all kinds of other fun too. So be sure to join the Discord as well. But yeah, without further ado, man, we're going to get into this video on Rogal Dorn, if it will load. I saw Italian Spartacus by the way, but when it comes to Primarch lore, he's really one of the only guys who does it, so yeah.
Of all the Emperor's sons, Rogal Dorn stands out as an individual of unflinching loyalty, defiant resolve, and thunderous zeal. We've talked so much about a lot of the other Primarchs that are known for their flourish, tragic storylines, or wide-sweeping effect on the grander Imperium. Rogal Dorn has always had this sort of behind-the-scenes feel. Even through a lot of the older Index of Stardust lore, Rogal Dorn didn't play so heavily a hand in the heresy itself, either attacking or defending. His true worth came about during the Siege of Terra itself as the Praetorian of Terra. In this video, we're going to talk about Dorn's upbringing, his success during the Great Crusade, and subsequent rivalries. Moreover, we're going to go into what becomes of the legacy of Dorn and the shame that loomed over the Primarch in his later years. Join me.
His whole chapter got annihilated pretty much, right? By that Esteban, is it called Esteban 5 or 3? I don't know which one it was that his chapter was, where the traitor legions got, like, was it salamanders, Imperial fists, and one of the others, and they fucking bombarded the shit out of them, right? Also, the Iron Warrior stole his gene seed, right? From his home planet. They stole the gene seed, so the Imperial Fists are kind of a bit fooked up, if you know what I'm saying. I think that's alright. And in terms of rivalries, who are Rogal Dorn's rivals? I think Perturabo, whatever his name is a rival. I'm not too sure about anyone else, but he seems very loyal. So you know, anyone who, I mean, obviously all the traitors. I don't know, man.
In a long overdue journey into our next Primarch, Rogal Dorn, the Praetorian of Terra. Inwit is where our drama begins, which is in no way a take on the word Inuit. Games Workshop would never be that transparent about a thinly veiled name. Surely you jest. Like his brother Leman Russ, Dorn lands on a death planet covered in ice. Its adjoining sun old and dying. Let's not confuse this with Fenris though. Inwit survived Old Night as a bit of a pocket empire, with a lot of their technology left intact after the collapse from the Age of Strife. And if you don't know what this is, take a look in the upper right corner of the screen. You should find a link to my video on Old Night and the Age of Strife. It's an immensely sparse but important part of the history of the early Imperium. Now, the people of Inwit were a tenacious lot, built to withstand any circumstance, endure and survive, no matter the hardship, no matter the outcome. This is a planet riddled with Florida-level Cat 7 ice storms that rip through the planet, freezing things within seconds. In addition, predatory wildlife roams the planet looking for any food, including humans. This creates a people that will make up the blueprint for the Imperial Fists to come. Grim, resolute, strong, but defiant. Now, we've talked about a lot of the other Death Worlds, but as I said, a lot of the technology of the former Golden Age of technology was still present on Inwit, and with it, the people eventually grew their pocket empire of sorts, spanning out into the stars. This creates two things. One, you have a population that is incredibly adaptable, having already steeped their hands in differing planets, technology, and means of conquest. Second, you have the need to reinforce these new planets, an ideal that also makes up the fabric of Rogal Dorn and the Imperial fists to come. And all of these things happen before Rogal Dorn even gets to the planet, which is important to note because most of the Primarchs were the zeitgeist for their home planet's expansion, not the other way around. Rogal Dorn grew up learning the ways of the Inwit Empire and how Inwit clung to the old ways as a means of preserving tradition and strengthening the roots that made these stalwart people that spanned their small corner of the universe. Behind the wall of orbital defense platforms and sprawling shipyards lay the same foundational clans and ice hive conflicts from pre-stellar expansion. Now, as much as I want to go into the early life of Rogal Dorn, as his many exploits, like no one can forget that time he shoplifted some e-cigs, they just don't exist. I'm not sure if this is Black Library's intention to make his latter life the focal point, or they're waiting for the Primarch series books on him in specific, but there's not much written on it. Not even in the Index Astartes. Yet, at least. But at the time of this video, the Siege of Terra is just getting started in the Horus Heresy book series, so maybe we'll get more.
So Rogal Dorn's upbringing is pretty much very unknown. That's kind of his character, I guess. You don't really know too much about Rogal Dorn. Like you said, he's very backgroundy, you know what I mean? Like, he's a guy that's in the background. Also, he vanished from after the heresy, right? After his hand was the only thing that they found. So, yeah, Rogal Dorn, I guess it fits his character. I'm assuming they will do some kind of expansiveness on him in the books and write some books on him, if they haven't already. This video is from 2019, though, so I don't know, man.
More as time progresses, and we'll get some kind of peer into that. But what we do know is that Rogal was raised and named as a child of the House of Dorn, rising to prominence fast, as every Primarch does. He was trained in the way of technology, strategy, diplomatic relations, and tactics from his grandfather. On Inwit, the ruling house you live under becomes your surname. Your clan name is, as it were. Ruling from their ice castle, quote unquote, which is just as badass of a name for an otherwise frosty character, Dorn progressed up to the ruler of Inwit, and thus the Inwit cluster. The story goes, as you would expect it, under his guidance, the Inwitans, or Inwitians, Inwitians, whatever the hell, expanded their burgeoning empire even further. Rogal's brilliant tactical mind allowed him to retrain the military and build starships far beyond the comprehension of previous rulers of the empire. When the Emperor came to Inwit, it was already forged into a massive stellar empire, ready to wage war in the name of the Great Crusade. And there isn't even a haughty meeting in which the Emperor had to prove himself, or like a bro-out moment of crushing Natty Light in the back of Leman Russ's Thunderhawk. Instead, Rogal Dorn presented the Emperor with a gift, the massive starship/mobile fortress, the Phalanx. It was discovered, dormant and abandoned, within the Inwit system, and was brought back to life by Dorn. The Emperor appears to be ingratiated by the gesture and the gift. The Emperor then returns the Phalanx to Dorn in the same moment it is gifted to him. Way to re-gift things, MP-Poo, the galactic equivalent of a white elephant with gifts you just kind of don't like. Now the
That's kind of like when you don't like a gift. Like what they do in the TV shows, they don't like a gift, so they're like, you know what, they give it back. And I saw that happen in real life. At school, a teacher brought in like Christmas cards for the whole class. And some guy just decided to scribble out his name and write the teacher's name back in the card. You know, just basically switch the to and from guys, and then the teacher got really angry at him.
Phalanx becomes a mobile fortress monastery to the other grand gift that the Emperor bestows upon Rogal Dorn, the 7th Legion, the newly renamed Imperial Fists. Dorn meshed almost immediately with his sons, all built in his image from his gene seed, already embodying the defiant, stoic, and resolute manner of their master. And it is said that upon meeting the Legion Master Matthias and other leaders of the Legion, Rogal Dorn said nothing. And he finally spoke to his sons after watching their resolve on the battlefield. And this is very true of the man behind the name of Rogal Dorn. Dorn is always painted in a very grim and quiet light. I would say enigmatic, but there's not mystery behind it. He simply is overly dedicated to the pursuit of the imperial truth, the ideals of the Emperor and the Imperium as a whole. There is an unflinching loyalty in his eyes, sure, but there is also a wild zeal hidden just underneath the surface. It is this zeal that is reflected into his sons that has created so much of the success of the 7th Legion. Regarded as one of the best military minds of all the Primarchs for his ability to construct masterful defenses and brilliant battle plans with the occasional zeal that helps as sort of a X factor to the otherwise logical pursuits of some of his brothers. And that's really the crux of both the Primarch and his legion. Although seemingly staunch and without character, their singular drive to succeed and persevere in the face of any adversity creates a terrifying monster behind the stone mask that Dorn wears flawlessly. The Great Crusade then went on just as you would imagine it from a Primarch so dedicated to the ideals of the Imperium. As a seventh Primarch to be discovered, which you guys should know plays no part in their legion number. It's just kind of pure coincidence. The Dark Angels are the first legion, but Horus was the first to be discovered, with Leman Russ second in line. So as the seventh Primarch to be discovered, Rogal Dorn had a long time to cement his legacy amongst the nascent Imperium, as well as alongside his growing frat.
I want to see the order in which they were actually discovered.
Delta Iota Kappa. The Imperial Fists clung heavily to the traditions set out by Dorn and the people of Inwit. Legion Master Matthias was even named High Castellan of the Inwit cluster and was immediately tasked with creating 30 more Imperial Fist regiments from their homeworld. Again, I have to really reaffirm how the already present value system in the Legion meshed so well with the Inwits that there was very little Terran Inwit pushback, unlike in other legions like the White Scars or the Raven Guard. And we talked about some of those values earlier, but it's worth bringing up again because it plays so heavily into the 7th Legion's dogma. With every planet they captured, they'd reinforce, then move on. Rogal Dorn was not concerned with the administration and legislation of the planets brought into compliance. He wholly believed he was a warrior of the Imperium, not a bureaucrat. As thus, he would maintain a small garrison, establish compliance and peace, and then again, just move on. This sort of quasi-Alexander the Great approach to conquering actually created the least amount of discontent from any newly compliant system compared to the other Primarchs. All the traditions of the pre-existing culture were pretty much left intact, with the exception of the Imperial secular truth supplanting any religious dogma. And there's a famous instance on a little-known place called Necromunda, where the Imperial Fists pushed the Orcs out of the system. The Hive Lords erected a massive fortress chapel in honor of the Imperial Fists, offering up recruits as sort of a tithe to the 7th Legion. And this was actually pretty customary, to take recruits as a means of tithe from planets freshly brought to compliance. But Dorn refused, saying that he'd rather have recruits versus vassals. Essentially, he was saying he wanted willing recruits versus rancorous ones, you know? Again, reaffirming this notion.
That's true. That's a great philosophy to go by. If someone does not want to work for you or be part of your cause, they're not going to do a good job, are they? So, yeah, he wants people that are willing and want to be part of his legion, for sure.
Wherein a military unit was in place, but none of the civic or political responsibilities that other legions would strive for. And for over 160 years, Dorn pushed the outermost boundaries of the Great Crusade, able to rapidly redeploy to help out other legions or any of his expeditionary fleets due to the nature of the phalanx. In Flight of the Eisenstein, we get a really great idea of just how just colossal or just massive this ship is. I mean, remember, legions are many times larger than a modern Space Marine chapter, and the phalanx was able to comfortably fit plenty of the elements of the 7th Legion, let me just say. Robert Guilliman even regards Rogal Dorn as one of 4 Primarchs, the Dauntless Few as he calls them, that best embody their father's ideals with unflinching loyalty.
So which 4 are they? I think it's obviously Rogal Dorn, probably himself, unless he didn't include himself, and the other 2 are probably Lionel Johnson, Leman Russ, and if he didn't include himself, definitely Sanguinius. Those are probably the 4 right there.
And total faith in the secular truth of the Great Crusade. And the others amongst that list are Sanguinius, Ferrus Manus, and Leman Russ.
God
what
damn
I like about all the
Ferrus Manus, then his head get chopped by Fulgrim, so sticky one.
Few is how good their individual character arcs are, and how very flawed each of the Dauntless Few truly are, while also being self-aware of it. Well, maybe not Ferrus Manus, he kind of loses his head before he has a chance to kind of come to terms with his temper. But through all of this, Rogal Dorn fought alongside almost all of his brothers, each one to great success for the most part. I mean, Dorn possessed the ability to comfortably adapt to each Primarch's fighting style, with a few kind of standout instances here and there. And I think we've come to expect the internal fighting, I guess you could say, of brothers with each Primarch we've talked about so far. And there's a particularly poignant instance where Rogal Dorn witnesses the brutality of the Night Lords firsthand, rebuking his brother Conrad Kurz and getting into a savage melee that almost claims one of the brothers' lives. That's definitely...
If you haven't heard about Conrad Kurz, you should check out my reaction to him. I mean, it is a long one, that one. That's like an hour long. Conrad Kurz, bro. He's one of the fucking craziest motherfuckers in this universe, ladies and gents. Like, Jesus Christ, that man needs some therapy. Jeez.
A story for Kurz on that one, because that leads to Kurz's sanction and a bunch of other issues that are way more spanning into his character. Now, through a lot of this conflict, Dorn had earned an incredible reputation as a master of defense. Indeed, Horus had even remarked in the earlier Horus heresy that if the Luna Wolves, masters of assault, had ever been pitted against the Imperial Fists, masters of defense, the conflict would be an eternal stalemate. That notion would soon be tested in time. The old adage of a movable object and unstoppable force kind of comes to mind here, which lends very well into the next portion of what I'm going to talk about. With the end of the Ulunar campaign, the Emperor names Horus as the War Master, to recall to Terra and complete his next great project, the work in the Great Webway. We've talked about that millions of times now. But he takes with him Rogal Dorn and the 7th Legion, charging them with the reinforcement and construction of the Imperial Palace. This sends the Primarch of the Iron Warriors, Perturabo, into a fit of rage. I mean, he has a temper tantrum so bad at the other members of his legion, and I'm not speaking in hyperbole here, as I am wont to do, are completely dumbfounded. Both of these Primarchs are both siege and defense masters, so for the Emperor to take Dorn over Perturabo was seen as a massive slight to the Master of the Iron Warriors. Perturabo made so many mad Twitter posts, but the two essentially rarely spoke after that moment. I mean, honestly...
He made so many mad Twitter posts, like you... Perturabo. I mean, that's probably the moment he descended to chaos right there.
This was a pretty long-spanning conflict between the two. Both are equally as stubborn and resolute in their own persecution of war across the galaxy. While they both lent their expertise to siegecraft as well as the defenses, they had different executions. Perturabo favored overwhelming application to specific hardpoints, oftentimes sustaining massive casualties with an ends justifying the means kind of approach. While Dorn, on the other hand, would never accept large casualties as a measure of success unless absolutely necessary. What it really came down to was Dorn's idealism versus Perturabo's pragmatism. Perturabo only saw logic without theory, while Dorn lived heavily in the theoretical, building out success from multiple approaches, going with the path that granted him not only success in the moment, but continued success. As Rogal Dorn is recalled to Terra, he joins with Horus's 63rd Expeditionary Fleet, for a few engagements. And from this, we get to peer into the mind of how Horus views Primarchs such as Guilliman and Dorn. This is kind of a bit of a segue from the ultimate story of Dorn, but it's kind of worth going into. It's a really cool moment here. But you have to remember that with the promotion to War Master, some Primarchs railed against the decision, deeming themselves worthy or cursing their father for abandoning them, whatever it was. This was not the case with Dorn. He saw it as a natural progression. Horus was the first and closest Primarch to the Emperor. The only legion to come close to Horus's accomplishments were the Imperial Fists, and even then it was not by a close margin. Ultimately, Dorn was reserved and resolute, where Horus was charismatic and prone to a good flourish, making him a better fit as his ability to connect with his brothers was above that of Dorn's. Dorn got along well with most of them, and he was not overly loved like Horus was by so many, Primarch and otherwise. But Horus, though, actually looked up to Dorn, Guilliman, and even Jagtai Khan, much in an older brother sort of light. And I think this is more because of the demeanor of all three of those Primarchs, being rather stoic and very resolute in their adherence to their father's ideals. Horus remarks that Dorn is one of the most brilliant tacticians in the Imperium because he combines so many great aspects of the other Primarchs. the disciplined approach of Guilliman, the courage of Lionel Johnson, but with the flashes of zeal and tenacity that Leman Russ and the Khan had in spades. This is where we get that notion from above about, Horus's remark about Dorne's ability to defend versus Horus's propensity for assault. After leaving the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet, Dorne takes to the reinforcement of Holy Terra itself. Since the Unification Wars, not much had been done in the way of fortifying or even cementing Terra's claim as the capital world of the millions of planets of the Imperium. The Emperor had deemed the Imperial Fists would be the Emperor's Praetorians, tasked with building up the fortifications that the Imperial Fists were so renowned for. This all happens right on the back of the Isstvan massacres and the outbreak of the Horus heresy. Massive warp storms bar Dorne's full retreat to Terra. Eventually, the Eisenstein, fleeing the Isstvan III massacre, emerges from the warp right in front of the phalanx. Taking in the majesty of this gigantic man-built flying moon space station Death Star, Nathaniel Garro of the Death Guard regales the story of Isstvan III. Dorne almost kills Garro for even hinting that Horus could be a traitor, but as his story is substantiated across more survivors, including Iacton Kurz of the the half-herd of the Luna Wolves, and the Remembrancer Euphrates Keeler, Dorne comes to realize the grim situation at hand. Dorne's eyes were alight with anger at his brother's misdeeds and unforgivable acts. He was torn between his wrathful retribution and his duty to the Emperor. And we've talked so much about the stoic, stony nature of Dorne, but I've purposely waited until this moment to really go into the true fire that resides below the surface of Rogal Dorn. While he is calculated and he is measured in his approach to warfare and cooking, he is also prone to brooding over matters, souring his mood and sending him into deep fits of vindictive rage.
I'd be pissed too, bro. The fuck? His brother, who he fully backed to be War Master, literally, after he was promoted, went and fought with him a few times, and almost treated him as a younger brother who Horus looked up to and respected, obviously a mutual respect, and had no issues, unlike some people had issues. I mean, probably a lot of people had issues with Horus being promoted, but I would be salty as well, bro. I would want to chop this man's head off. But it does make sense that he got the job to build and reinforce Terra, considering he's one of the best builders, He built those massive ships and all of that. He's the best primarch at defense, so yeah, it makes sense.
And this secondary nature would go on to color the Black Templars of the Second Founding in the many, many, many years to come. And another character, on that note, I guess, another character we haven't touched on, and one that plays heavily into the aforementioned future chapter, is First Captain Sigismund. A Terran-born Imperial Fist, Sigismund acted as the direct right hand of Dorne after leaving the Inwit cluster. Renowned across the entire Imperium as a peerless swordsman, completely undefeated in single combat save for one instance with Iago Civitarien of the Night Lords, who, consequently headbutted him during the duel, but whatever gets the big W, right? But most of the Horus heresy books are actually kind of told from the perspectives of the many first captains, or at least just captains in general of repute, of the many legions. So naturally, we would come to truly understand Sigismund's role in the galaxy, but moreover, the unique relationship between him and Dorne. This gives us a direct insight into the type of character that Rogal is, as Sigismund has a pretty tragic story that culminates in the creation of the Black Templars, and I'd gladly go into that in a side video.
Black Templars are the most religious sect, right? They pray to the Emperor and all sorts. Hey, if you have seen Hell's Reach, bro, Grimaldus. I love Grimaldus, man. What a guy. But yeah, they're over the top religious, right? So yeah, I guess I want to know how they're formed. We can check a video out of that.
On that subject, if you guys are interested. So after Horus's treachery was discovered, Dorne assembled a retribution fleet to act as the instrument for his wrath against his brother. Comprised of 30,000 Imperial Fists and 500 warships, would set course for Isstvan V to bring Horus to heel, joining up with their brother chapters to aid in the endeavor. Brother legions, not chapters. Sigismund instead stayed with his primarch, surprising Dorne and ultimately playing into the further tragedy of Sigismund. With the board set, Dorne made way for Terra with the remainder of his forces to set up the defenses. Especially in these dire times, a fortified capital world was more important than ever. Now, I'm sorry if bringing Sigismund into this kind of confused you a bit, but it's important to help explain two of the big scenarios of the Solar Campaign. The first of which was a massive incursion by the Alpha Legion. Alpharius and Omegon, twin primarchs of the Alpha Legion, have been set in motion for the Solar War far before the events of the Istvan Dropsite Massacre. The goal here was to plant as many quote-unquote sleeper cells of Alpha Legionnaires throughout the entirety of the Segmentum Solar, with the ultimate goal of penetrating the impenetrable, the Imperial Palace. Now you see, Dorn turned the entire Sol system into a fortress, into a series of perfunctory defense strata that acted as overlapping cover for each one, also known as defense in depth. That's a pretty common term. But the objective would be to whittle down Horus's invading fleet by the time it reached Terra, and by then it would be easier to deal with. That's how Dorn had built this kind of defense structure, at least. The Alpha Legion was already well within those defenses, though. Inside of the Investiary, within the Imperial Palace, lay the combined statues of all the Primarchs. The 9 traitor Primarchs had been covered up, so the Alpha Legion destroyed all but the statue of Alpharius and Rogal Dorn, a direct challenge to the defense of the Imperial Palace. This enraged Rogal Dorn, like someone photobombing an Instagram model's selfie at a music festival. Okay, maybe not that histrionic, but he immediately took to rooting out the Legionnaires. Thus starts the Battle of Pluto, where a massive Alpha Legion fleet led by Alpharius, I keep wanting to say Malfarius, by Alpharius himself, drifted beyond the outermost defenses of the system by having the entire armada drift in stasis. Now, there are a lot of details to this story, but I'm going to save it primarily for Alpharius' video because it's more of a tale of his genius rather than anything else. I mean, yeah, sure, Dorn takes a part in it, but the actual telling of it actually is from his perspective anyway, so I'll save it for him. The primary objective, though, was Pluto's moon of Hydra, a major astropathic monitoring station. It would act as the first warning system to the rest of the Sol system, while also keeping the Loyalist forces well informed about the movement of Horus's fleet. Leading the defense was First Captain Sigismund, you remember him, and the only available Imperial Fist ships, numbering no more than 30. The Imperial Fist's mastery of defense was put to the test as overwhelming odds were slowed to a crawl. Sigismund, using overlapping fire, surgical counterattacks, and well-placed defenses to thwart...
Oh, they had a whole Spartan situation, the 300 going on here, man, defense versus the offense, when they were outnumbered. Huh. Good luck, Sigismund, mate, good luck.
Momentum of Alpharius' onslaught. Amongst the defenders were a contingent of the elite Terminators of the Imperial Fists, the Huskarls. We've talked about some of the other elite troops of other legions, right? Such as the Atramentar of the Night Lords or the Fire Drakes of the Salamanders. As Sigismund and Arcamus, the master of the Huskarls, were pitched in a losing fight against Alpharius, Rogal Dorn entered the system aboard the Phalanx with an Imperial fleet in tow. Imperial Fist fleet. Arcamus, mortally wounded on the floor of the station on Hydra, watched as his father battled his uncle. The 2 Primarchs locked in deadly combat, Alpharius' pale spear stabbing towards Dorn as he parried with his massive chainsword Storm's Teeth. Alpharius was poised for a killing blow, driving his spear deep into Dorn. Rogal had seen the blow coming, though, and stepped in the way, taking the stab directly on his World of Warcraft level huge Imperial Eagle pauldron. Rogal Dorn then pinned his brother in place and sawed through Alpharius' wrists, severing his hands from his arms, and slashed a deep ribbon of crimson down his chest before driving Alpharius' own spear into his chest. Just for good measure, Dorn then dropped Storm's Teeth into Alpharius' skull, killing the Primarch instantly. And this is extremely important. Alpharius marks only one of 3 Primarchs to die during the Horus Heresy, but most importantly...
The 3 that died. Wait, didn't 4 die? Like, what? If Alpharius died, Sanguinius died, right? Horus died, and so did Ferrus Manus, right? Or did Ferrus Manus die after?
Dorn is the first Loyalist to kill a traitor Primarch. This ultimately results in Omegon assuming the identity of Alpharius as the Legion retreats from the Sol system. After the battle for Pluto, another major battle happened on Mars, the second battle of the Sol campaign, during the Great Schism with the Mechanicus. Sigismund was able to recover a good portion of munitions and armor for use in the defense of Terra to come. Now, we don't know a ton of the details for the Siege of Terra, just yet, as that is currently in motion in the Horus Heresy books, like I was saying. But we do know that the Imperial fists held the walls of the Imperial Palace alongside their White Scars and Blood Angels brothers. The primarchs of all three legions fighting where the battle was thickest and or most fierce. Then came the attack on the Vengeful Spirit, where the Emperor, Adeptus Custodes, Sanguinius, and Dorn all teleported aboard Horus's flagship. And this story goes as we've told it before, but Dorn arrived too late to fight to help, having been teleported furthest from his father and brother. Dorn was left to discover the bodies of his brothers and father strewn about the bridge. Returning his father to Terra, Rogal Dorn was the last person to hear from the Emperor as he was interred upon the Golden Throne. The Emperor's final commands on how to rebuild the Imperium resounded in Rogal's ear as his father's body was put to rest upon the machine that would power his spirit for the many ages to come.
Rest in peace. That's so sad, man. Imagine, man, like, all getting teleported on the ship and you're just teleported way too far away. Because you gotta remember, these ships are fucking massive, like kilometers long. So if you're teleported on the opposite side, you know, it's a bit deep. But Horus obviously fought Sanguinius and beat him, then fought the Emperor. The Emperor should have shot on his chest, but he didn't. And then Rogal Dorn arrived when it was too late. And ripped to that Imperial Guardsman. I forget his name, but he done a great job too.
After the heresy's conclusion, the weight of the entire siege of Terra weighed heavily upon Rogal Dorn, not to mention the death of two brothers, in addition to the fatal wounding of his father. Dorn not only felt like a failure, but he also felt responsible. Who better to protect the Emperor than the Defiant One, the Praetorian of Terra? The defining characteristic of Dorn is his duty, and in making it through the heresy...
What did Big E say to him? Did he not disclose that?
He felt as if he had failed that duty. The Emperor gave Rogal Dorn a sense of identity, and he felt as if he shattered that and betrayed the very ideals he stood for. Dorn's answer was a crusade of penitence, scouring the Imperium and purging any traitorous filth from the fragile Imperium. The Codex Astartes was eventually proposed to all the remaining primarchs, reducing the legions to 1,000-strong fighting forces known as chapters, as we know them today. This outraged Dorn, as he felt this was a punishment levied at him by his brothers for his failing in the defense of the Emperor. Worse still, Dorn figured that they were right in their blaming of him, increasing his already despondent move. The remaining loyalist primarchs were split once again, half of them wishing to adopt the Codex Astartes, while Rogal Dorn, Leman Russ, and Vulcan all really refused adamantly. It was definitely a heated time, with elements of the newly reformed Imperial Navy even firing upon an Imperial Fist's vessel. Dorn knew that the Imperium could not withstand another civil war. He needed a sign of sorts. He needed guidance. What he truly needed was his father. Now, I don't want this to be seen as a sign of weakness, but rather a very human moment from a Primarch that has always been overly stoic in the face of almost any situation. And that's what I think is the big thing here, is that the stone is kind of cracked, right? And we now see through the character armor of Dorn. And that is very telling, and it is very, again, humanizing to an otherwise demigod. Though Dorn took to flagellating instead of making throw rugs. Namely with an instrument called the Pain Glove. Dorn believed heavily in the notion that pain and strife purified the body.
And in the TTS series where he asked his glove, and the glove told him what to do. That's hilarious.
In mind, giving purpose and resolve. This is a pretty gnarly device. Essentially, you're covered in electric diodes via a body glove, hence the name, Pain Glove, across your, entire body. A large metal collar prevents you from snapping your own neck, while also injecting the brain with chemicals to prevent you from passing out. It's a wicked good time. Slaanesh would be proud, but that's neither here nor there. Rogal was granted a vision within...
Definitely, Slaanesh, Eldar, they'd all be having a great time with that, wouldn't they? Step right up their street, ladies and gentlemen. Right up it. It's kind of funny that he's the fist and the glove, it's kind of funny.
In the Plain Glove by the Emperor, in which he had to purify his legion in a sort of metaphorical pain glove of sorts. And to do this, Rogal Dorn answered the goading of his brother Perturabo. The Iron Warriors had erected a bastion on the world of Sebastus IV, calling it the Iron Cage. Perturabo's challenge was simple: prove that he was the better of the two. Dorn declared that his entire legion would enter the proverbial gauntlet and come out the other side as chapters, adhering to the Codex Astartes. The Iron Cage was a massive death trap, though, overlapping fire covered every entry into the Colossus fortress. And this was designed solely to completely kill Rogal Dorn and his legion, satisfying the now demon primarch Perturabo's shattered ego. And the Imperial fists crashed into the cage, despite being at a gross disadvantage. They fought with all the zeal that was hidden deep within their character, overcoming each trap through sheer force of will alone, pushing deeper and deeper into the cage. Upon reaching the center, Dorn discovered that Perturabo wasn't there, and that the Iron Warrior's final trap was the surrounding of their brother legion. Bobby G, boom, entered the system at the last moment, bringing the might of the Ultramarines to bear, aiding in the extraction of the Imperial fists.
Bobby G! Yes, brother! You know, I love Bobby G, bro. That guy, man, he might not be very skilled compared to the other Primarchs in fighting. You know, he might be the boring one, you know, but he really is the sensible one. Like, you know, when you have siblings and then, you know, maybe you're not the one on that parties, maybe you're not the funny one, maybe not all of that, but you're the one who gets the best job and you make the most money. That's who Bobby G is. You know, he might not be anyone's favourite. He's like that sequential middle child who you could take him or leave him, but he is the most successful. So shout out Bobby G.
While the Iron Warriors escaped. And although massive casualties were sustained, the gauntlet was complete in Dorn's eyes, and in the Imperial fists had been purified. For the next 20 years, the successor chapters of the Second Founding, the Crimson Fists and the Black Templars, exacted war on their parent legion's behalf while they reformed, or the Imperial Fists reformed, as it were. And rising from the flames like a beautiful Imperial Aquila with stunner shades on, the Imperial Fists returned to battle with such a
rising from the flames like a phoenix, bro.
Staunch adherence. Rising from the flames like a beautiful Imperial Aquila with stunner shades on, the Imperial Fists returned to battle with such a staunch adherence to the tenets of the Codex that they were second only to the Ultramarines themselves. As time went on, the Primarchs slowly died off or vanished one by one, with Dorn becoming one of the last Primarchs to fall. Shortly after the disappearance of Corvus Corax in the mid to late 31st millennium, the first of the 13 Black Crusades was launched. Rogal Dorn and the Imperial Fists were the first to respond, catching the traitorous forces as they mustered outside of the Eye of Terror. Dorn mounted an immediate counteroffensive, taking 3 Imperial Fist companies and leading a series of successful boarding actions, crippling engine bays, shutting down life support, and turning the weapons of one ship onto another many times over. As the Primarch destroyed a swath of the enemy ships, they eventually cornered him aboard the Sword of Sacrilege. There, Rogal Dorn, the Praetorian of Terra, met his end. Surrounded by enemies on all sides, no one survived the engagement. His body was eventually discovered by the Chief Librarian, who quickly recovered their Primarch. Now, I want to talk about a quick conflict, I guess? Yeah, a quick canon conflict on that. In the older lore, Rogal Dorn's body was never really found. Rather, his gauntlet was recovered, and on it was like inscribed every single chapter master since its recovery, and it's kind of like a large rallying point for not just the Imperial Fists, but all of their founding chapters after that. And it was believed that he was lost somewhere in the warp or taken by the enemy, but that he would return with the enigmatic caveat of, quote unquote, before the end times, that kind of situation.
Like everyone.
In fact, like almost every single Primarch in the old lore has like that Arthurian asterisk next to their name of like, oh, he will return from Avalon when we need him the most. But whichever you believe, the Imperial Fists lost their Primarch, but he birthed a wide-spanning legacy of many chapters that bear the mark of Sons of Dorn. The Black Templars ride out in crusade in perpetuity, the scions of Sigismund delivering the Emperor's zeal, while the Crimson Fists live up to their namesake, diving headlong into engagements across the galaxy. Rogal Dorn is a figure that has always been a strong scaffolding to the lore, but has never had the true fleshing out of his more over-the-top or histrionic brothers. This, of course, does not cheat the Defiant One's grand legacy. Now remember, this is the only legion, or, well now, chapter, that calls Terra their homeworld. The Phalanx is still in use to this day, although a shadow of its former self, most of its systems shutting down as to no longer supply a legion, but rather a chapter. The deep and spanning history of the Imperial Fists is filled with the same tenacity and fervor that their gene father created in all of them. There will always be an Imperial Palace, and there will always be Imperial Fists to defend it because of the dutiful sacrifices that Rogal Dorn laid down. Despite all of this, we see a very flawed character with a lot of human qualities, loss, regret, guilt, all of them play their ugly hand across the matrix of Dorn's life post-heresy. From it arise 2 chapters whose names are synonymous with righteous vindication. The legacy of Dorn lives on through his sons, just as much through the words. The legacy of Dorn lives on through his sons, just as much through the worlds that they defend. Hopefully you enjoyed this video here today. And
Thank you, Mr. Paul Spartacus. Alright, that is the end of Rogal Dorn. My thoughts. He said something very interesting at the end about how Rogal Dorn is like very integral to the scaffolding, you know, the foundations of the law, but he's not really at the forefront, you know? He's kind of buried because all the other primarchs have something. I mean, other than Bobby G, who is basically a bit more Rogal Dorn in the fact that he's very loyal, he can't be swayed, he has no anger, he's very, very methodical. Rogal Dorn is all that, but then he can tip over the edge and turn into an angry, vengeful person, right? I'm not too sure whether he's now dead or alive. He's obviously in that same stage as everyone else he's pretty much dead, but maybe he'll come back, right? Like Lionel Johnson, Lehman Russ, Bobby G, but he got revived. I mean, pretty much every Primarch, except for the few that are confirmed dead, Sanguinius, Horus, Ferrus Manus, and Alpharius, or whatever his name is. Apart from those guys, everyone else is still alive and around, or in some way, shape, or form, or dead and could come back, right? But yeah, man, let me know what you guys thought of Rogal Dorn. I think he's one of my favourite Primarchs. I mean, obviously the TTS series here is hilarious. I don't think he's my favourite character there, but he's still very good. I think he's one of my favourite Primarchs. But we haven't covered them all yet. Anyway, thank you all for watching this video. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.